The Alpha King who begged a blacksmith. They said no woman could refuse an Alpha King. They were wrong. For 37 mornings, Ronan Vale, the most powerful man in the Northern Territories, rode into Brim Hollow and asked the same question. For 37 mornings, Elin Maris said no. The village laughed. The council whispered. Even his own men doubted him. But what they didn't see was the fire that bent toward him when he approached her forge. What they didn't know was that rejection, in the harshest lands, is sometimes the beginning of something no king has ever claimed. Stay until the end. Hit like. Tell us where you're watching from. The sun had barely cracked the frozen horizon when the sound of hooves echoed through Brim Hollow's narrow streets. Most villagers didn't bother looking up anymore. They knew who it was. Alpha King Ronan Vale. And they knew exactly where he was going. Elin Maris heard the hoofbeats before she saw him. She always did. Her hammer paused mid-swing against the red-hot iron on her anvil, and for just a heartbeat she allowed herself to feel the weight of inevitability settling over her shoulders like the ash from her forge. Then she swung again. Harder. The ringing of metal on metal drowned out the approaching rider, and she told herself that was exactly what she wanted. "Morning, Elin." His voice cut through the hammer strikes like a blade through butter, low, steady, and maddeningly patient. She didn't turn around. "Go away, Ronan." "Can't do that." "Then stand there and be useless. I've got work." Behind her she heard the creak of leather as he dismounted. His boots crunched against the frozen dirt of her yard, each step measured and deliberate. He never rushed, never demanded. That was what infuriated her most. An Alpha King should command, should take, should remind everyone within earshot that his word was law and his will was absolute. Ronan Vale did none of those things. He just kept coming back. "You're making a blade," he observed, moving close enough that she could feel the heat displacement in the air, his presence shifting the warmth of her forge. "Brilliant observation," Elin muttered, plunging the glowing metal into the water trough. Steam hissed up between them like a living barrier. "Maybe tomorrow you'll figure out what a hammer is." "It's for the Henderson's boy, isn't it? The one who wants to apprentice with the Northern Guard." Elin's jaw tightened. She hated that he paid attention, hated that he knew her customers, knew her work, knew the rhythms of her life without ever being invited into them. "What do you want, Ronan?" "Same thing I wanted yesterday." "Then you're wasting both our time." She finally turns to face him, hammer still in hand, her leather apron scorched and stained from years of work. Elin Maris was not a beauty by Brim Hollow standards. Her hands were calloused, her shoulders broad from swinging heavy tools, her face smudged with soot more often than not. But her eyes were clear and sharp as the blades she forged, and when she looked at Ronan Vale, she made sure he saw nothing but refusal. Ronan stood there in his riding coat, dark hair wind-ruffed, the morning light catching the edge of his jaw. He was handsome, she'd give him that much, though it galled her to admit it even silently. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that made other men step aside without thinking. But Elin Maris had never stepped aside for anyone. "You know what they're saying in the village," Ronan said quietly. "I don't care what they're saying. They think you're a fool. They've thought that since I refused to marry the blacksmith's son and took over this forge myself." Elin turned back to her work, selecting a new piece of raw iron from her stock. "I stopped caring about their opinions years ago. They think I'm a fool too." That made her pause. She glanced back at him, one eyebrow raised. "And?" "And they're probably right." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. Only a fool would keep asking a question when he knows the answer. "Then why do you?" The smile faded. What replaced it was something rawer, something that made Elin's pulse kick despite herself. "Because the answer might change." "It won't." "It might." "It won't, Ronan." She hefted the new iron, feeling its weight, judging where to make the first cut. "How many times do I have to say it? I'm not interested in being your mate. I'm not interested in being anyone's mate. I built this life myself with these hands, and I'm not handing it over to any man, king or otherwise. I'm not asking you to hand over anything." "Yes, you are." Elin's voice rose, and she hated the emotion bleeding into it. "You just don't realize it. The moment I say yes to you, everything changes. This forge, it becomes the king's mate's little hobby." This independence, it becomes the king's mate's charming eccentricity. Me. I stop being Elin Maris and become an accessory to your power. That's not... Don't. She held up one scarred hand. Don't tell me it's not like that. I've seen it happen to every woman who's ever gotten close to power in this territory. They disappear into their mate's shadow, and everyone pretends it's romantic. Ronan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. My mother ran 3 villages and a trading network that spanned half the northern territories. Even after she mated my father, even after I was born, she never disappeared into anyone's shadow. Your mother was exceptional. So are you. The words hung in the cold morning air between them. Elin felt something twist in her chest, something dangerous and unwanted. She crushed it ruthlessly. Flattery doesn't work on me, Ronan. It's not flattery. It's observation. He moved closer, and this time Elin didn't have steam to hide behind. You're the best blacksmith in 5 territories. You've trained yourself, built this business from nothing, and you've never compromised your standards for anyone. That's not common. That's not ordinary. That's exceptional. And you think exceptional women should mate with kings? Elin's laugh was bitter. How convenient for you. I think exceptional women should do whatever the hell they want. Ronan's eyes held hers, including telling kings to go to hell every morning if that's what makes them happy. Elin blinked. That wasn't what she'd expected. Then why do you keep coming back? Because I'm hoping that someday what makes you happy might include me. He said it simply, without ego, without expectation, just fact. But if it doesn't, if you spend the rest of your life saying no, then I'll respect that too. Elin struggled for words. That's insane. You're a king. You could have any woman in the territories. I don't want any woman. I want you. Why? It was the first time she'd asked. In 37 mornings of rejection, she'd never once asked him why. Ronan looked at her for a long moment, and something flickered in his expression, something vulnerable and true. Because you're the only person in my life who doesn't need me, he said quietly. Everyone else needs something, protection, resources, leadership, decisions. But you? You built your own protection. You create your own resources. You lead yourself. And when I'm here, I'm not the king. I'm just a man you're annoyed with. Despite herself, Elin felt her mouth twitch. You are annoying. I know. And persistent. Definitely. And delusional if you think this is going to work. Probably. He smiled then, and it transformed his face from handsome to something more dangerous, something warm and real and entirely too appealing. But I'm also patient, so I'll be back tomorrow. I'll say no tomorrow too. I know. And the day after that. I expect nothing less. Elin shook her head, but she felt something shift in her chest, something like the iron in her forge when it finally reached the right temperature to be worked. Not soft, not yielding, but malleable, just slightly. You're wasting your time, she said, but the words had less edge than before. It's my time to waste. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted from the village center. Raised voices, the sound of running feet, and underneath it all, a note of panic that made both of them turn. Marcus Chen, one of the village council members, came running up the path to Elin's forge, his face flushed with exertion and fear. Your Majesty, he panted, then seemed to remember protocol and sketched a hasty bow. Alpha King, we need you. Now. Ronan's entire demeanor shifted. The patient suitor vanished, replaced by the king who'd held the northern territories together through 3 brutal winters and 2 attempted coups. What's happened? Wolves, sir. A pack of them. They've been spotted on the northern ridge, at least 20, maybe more. And they're not running. They're watching the village. Elin felt ice slide down her spine. Wolves this far south, this late in the season, meant only one thing. The northern hunting grounds had failed. They were starving. And starving wolves didn't watch villages. They attacked them. How long? Ronan's voice was clipped, efficient. Scouts spotted them at dawn. They've been circling ever since, getting closer. Marcus's eyes darted between the king and Elin. We've called everyone in from the outlying farms. We're fortifying the main square, but Brim Hollow wasn't built to withstand a siege. Ronan finished grimly. The walls are decorative, not defensive. We have the community hall, Marcus offered weakly. Stone walls, strong doors, and room for maybe half the village if you pack them in like livestock. Ronan's jaw tightened. What about livestock? Have you brought in the herds? We're trying, but the wolves are between us and the northern pastures. We've already lost the Morrison sheep, found what was left of them an hour ago. Elin's mind raced. A pack that large, that desperate, wouldn't be satisfied with sheep. They'd keep hunting until they found easier prey or ran out of targets. You need to evacuate, she said quietly. Both men looked at her. The village can't hold against a pack that size, Elin continued, her blacksmith's mind already calculating angles and weaknesses. The walls are too low, too weak. The community hall might protect people for a day or two, but you can't keep everyone fed and calm in that space. Fear will do as much damage as the wolves. Evacuate to where? Marcus demanded. The next settlement is 2 days' ride, and that's for horsemen traveling light. With families, with children, then you have a choice, Elin interrupted. Die here slowly or risk the road. That's not a choice, Marcus snapped. That's suicide. Half the village wouldn't make it 10 miles before the wolves ran them down. Then make the community hall work, Elin shot back. Ration everything, keep weapons ready, and pray the pack moves on before you run out of supplies or patience. There's a third option. Ronan's voice cut through their argument like a blade through flesh. Both of them turned to look at him. We don't run. We don't hide. His eyes were hard, calculating. We hunt them first. Marcus's face went pale. Your Majesty, with respect, that's insane. Ronan's smile held no humor. Maybe. But it's also the only option that doesn't end with half this village dead or scattered. A pack of 20 wolves can't hunt us if we hunt them. You're talking about taking fighters out there, into the open, against a starving wolf pack. Marcus looked like he might be sick. We'd need 50 men, good weapons, tactical positioning. Ronan was already moving, his mind clearly shifting into battle mode. We know this terrain better than they do. We use that. Draw them into a kill zone, take out enough of the pack to make the rest scatter. And if it doesn't work? Elin asked quietly. Ronan met her eyes. For a moment, the king disappeared again, and she saw something rawer underneath. Then at least we'll die fighting instead of cowering. The words hung in the air like smoke from her forge, thick and undeniable. Marcus was shaking his head. I need to get back. The council needs to know. Tell them I'm organizing a hunting party, Ronan commanded. Every man who can hold a weapon meets at the main square in 1 hour. We'll need torches, oil, anything that burns. Fire? Marcus looked confused. Wolves fear fire more than they fear men, Elin said quietly. Both men looked at her again, and she shrugged. My father used to hunt. I know things. Ronan's expression shifted, something like respect flickering across his features. Then we use fire. Go, Marcus, spread the word. The councilmen fled, leaving Elin and Ronan alone in the shadow of her forge. You're really going to do this, Elin said. It wasn't a question. I'm really going to do this. You could die. I could. Ronan turned to face her fully. But I'm the king. If I hide while my people face this threat, I'm not worth the title. Elin studied him for a long moment. She'd spent 37 mornings pushing him away, refusing to see him as anything but an unwanted suitor. But standing here, watching him prepare to walk into deadly danger for a village that barely acknowledged his authority, she saw something different. Not a king trying to control her. A man trying to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. The forge stays open, she said abruptly. Ronan blinked. What? During the evacuation, while you're out hunting, the forge stays open. Elin's voice was firm. Someone needs to be ready to repair weapons, forge new ones if the fight comes here. Someone needs to keep the fire burning. Elin, if the wolves break through, then I'll deal with it. She met his eyes steadily. This is my forge, my life. I'm not abandoning it because of wolves or kings or anyone else. That's suicide. No, that's a choice. Elin turned back to her anvil,
already calculating what she'd need. You're choosing to hunt.
I'm choosing to hold this position. Neither of us is wrong. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. I know. It's going to get you killed. Maybe. Elin picked up her hammer again. But it's my death to risk. Ronan was quiet for so long that she finally looked back at him. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes made her breath catch. If I survive this, he said softly, I'm coming back tomorrow morning. I know. And you'll say no again. Probably.
But maybe not. Despite everything, the danger, the fear, the wolves circling just beyond the village, Elin felt her mouth curve into something that wasn't quite a smile. Maybe not, she admitted. It was the first crack in 37 mornings of rejection, and from the way Ronan's face transformed, he knew it. Then I'd better survive, he said. You'd better. He moved toward his horse, then paused. When he looked back at her, his voice was rough, with something that might have been hope or might have been fear. She couldn't tell which. When this is over, Ronan said, will you tell me why you finally changed your mind? Elin considered lying, considered deflecting, considered all the walls she'd built to keep men like him at a distance. Then she decided to tell the truth. Because you didn't try to stop me from keeping the forge open, she said quietly. Any other man, any other king, would have commanded me to evacuate, would have used his authority to force me to safety, but you didn't. Your choice to make, Ronan said simply. Exactly. Elin held his gaze. And that's why maybe, just maybe, I might be willing to hear what you have to say tomorrow. If there is a tomorrow, there will be. She said it with the same certainty she used when judging the temper of steel. For both of us. Ronan smiled, a real smile this time, not the patient mask he usually wore. Yes, ma'am. Then he swung onto his horse and rode back toward the village center, leaving Elin alone with her forge and her thoughts. She stood there for a long moment, listening to the sound of hoofbeats fading into the distance, feeling the warmth of the fire at her back and the cold of the morning on her face. 37 mornings of saying no. And now, with wolves circling and death waiting just beyond the walls, she'd finally cracked open the door. The irony wasn't lost on her. Figures, Elin muttered to herself, turning back to her work. Only I would start falling for a man when we're both about to die. But even as she said it, even as she began preparing her forge for whatever was coming, she felt something shift inside her chest. Not surrender, not defeat, something fiercer, something that burned hotter than any fire she'd ever tended. Hope. And in the harsh frontier of Brim Hollow, hope was the most dangerous thing you could carry. The day wore on. From her forge, Elin could hear the village transforming, the organized chaos of evacuation mixing with the grim preparation for war. Children's voices rose in confusion and fear. Women argued about what to pack, what to leave behind. Men sharpened weapons they'd never expected to use. And through it all, one sound dominated. The howling from the northern ridge. It started soft, almost musical. By midday, it had grown into a chorus that made even Elin's hands shake. They were coming closer. She forced herself to focus, to work. The Henderson boys' blade needed to be finished. The Morrisons' plow blade had been waiting for repair. Mrs. Chen had ordered a new set of cooking knives 2 weeks ago. Normal work, normal life. As if wolves weren't circling, as if death wasn't coming. You're still here! The voice made her jump. She spun, hammer raised, then lowered it when she saw Sarah Morrison standing in the doorway of her forge. Sarah was 17, gap-toothed and gangly, with hands that could gentle even the wildest horse. She was also Elin's only real friend in Brim Hollow, the only person who'd never once questioned her choice to run the forge alone. Where else would I be? Elin asked. Safe, in the community hall with everyone else. Sarah stepped inside and Elin noticed the pack on her back, the fear in her eyes. They're evacuating everyone under 20 and over 50. My grandmother refuses to go without me, so I'm going with her. Smart. Stupid, Sarah's voice cracked. But she's all I have left, and I won't let her face this alone. Elin set down her hammer and crossed to her friend, pulling her into a brief, fierce hug. You'll be fine. The hall is solid, and Ronan's hunting party will draw the wolves off. And if they don't, then you bar the doors and wait it out. Wolves can't break stone, but they can starve us out. Sarah pulled back, her eyes red. Everyone knows it. We're just pretending we have a chance. We do have a chance. Because the king is playing hero? Sarah's laugh was bitter. The same king who's been chasing you for over a month like a lovesick puppy? He's not playing hero. He's doing his job. And you're staying here because... Elin hesitated. She didn't have a good answer, or rather, she had too many answers, and none of them made sense even to herself. Because someone needs to, she finally said. That's the dumbest reason I've ever heard. I know. You're going to die for a forge, Elin. A building. No? Elin's voice was soft but firm. I'm going to die, if I die, for the choice to stay, for the right to decide my own fate. That's worth fighting for. Sarah stared at her for a long moment, then shook her head. You and the king, you're perfect for each other, both of you too stubborn to see sense. Before Elin could respond, a bell began to ring, the evacuation signal. Sarah flinched. I have to go. I know. If you die, I'll never forgive you. If I die, I won't care about your forgiveness. Sarah laughed, a watery, desperate sound, and hugged Elin one more time. Then she was gone, running back toward the village center where her grandmother waited. Elin stood in the doorway of her forge, watching the last of the villagers hurry toward safety. Families clutching children. Old men carrying what little they could save. Women with fear etched into every line of their faces. And through it all, the howling grew louder. She turned back to her work. If she was going to die today, she'd die doing what she loved, making something from nothing, creating order from chaos, bending metal to her will. The sun crawled across the sky. The howling intensified. And Elin Maris worked her forge like a woman possessed, because in the end, that's all any of them could do. Keep working, keep fighting, keep choosing, even when the wolves were at the door. The hunting party left at high noon, 53 men armed with whatever weapons Brim Hollow could scrape together. Elin watched them go from the doorway of her forge, her eyes tracking Ronan's dark form at the head of the column until the forest swallowed them whole. Then she went back to work. The village fell into an eerie silence after the evacuation. No children playing in the streets. No merchants hawking goods. No gossip floating between windows. Just the wind, the distant howling, and the rhythmic clang of Elin's hammer against steel. She'd been working for perhaps an hour when footsteps crunched on the frozen ground outside. I knew you'd still be here. Elin didn't need to look up to recognize the voice. Councilman Thomas Ray, the oldest and most traditional member of Brim Hollow's council, the man who'd fought hardest against her taking over the forge after her father's death. If you're here to evacuate me, save your breath, she said, not pausing in her work. I'm here to tell you you're a fool. Thomas stepped into the forge's heat, his lined face shadowed with disapproval. But I already knew that about you. Then why waste both our time? Because foolishness is contagious. Thomas's voice was sharp. The king might have survived if he'd led from the rear, stayed strategic. But no, he had to ride at the front of that column, had to play the hero. And you know why? Elin's hammer paused. Against her better judgment, she looked up. Enlighten me. You. Thomas jabbed a finger at her. He's trying to impress you, girl. Trying to prove he's worthy of the woman who keeps rejecting him. And it's going to get him killed. The words hit harder than Elin expected. She forced herself to keep her voice level. Ronan makes his own choices. Does he? Or does he make choices based on what he thinks will finally crack that ice around your heart? Thomas moved closer, and in the firelight his face looked ancient and worn. I've watched kings for 40 years, child. I know when a man's judgment is compromised, and our king's judgment has been compromised since the day he first saw you. That's not my fault, isn't it? Thomas's laugh was bitter. You could have said yes, could have mated him, moved into the capital, become what every other woman in the territories would kill to be a queen. But no, you had to cling to this forge, this independence, this stubborn pride. And now good men are riding to their deaths because the king needs to prove something to you. Elin felt anger flare hot in her chest. Those men are riding out because there's a wolf pack threatening this village. That has nothing to do with me. Everything has to do with you. Thomas's voice rose. If you'd said yes weeks ago, the king would have left Brim Hollow. He'd be safe in the capital, organizing proper defenses, sending trained soldiers instead of farmers and merchants. But he stayed. Day after day, morning after morning, he stayed. For you. I didn't ask him to stay. You didn't have to. That's the power you hold over him, whether you admit it or not. Thomas's eyes were hard. And when he dies out there, his blood will be on your hands as surely as if you'd killed him yourself. The words hung in the air like smoke. Elin felt something cold and terrible settle in her stomach. Get out, she said quietly. The truth hurts, doesn't it? Get out. Thomas stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head. I'm going to the community hall. When this is over, if any of us survive, I'll make sure the council knows exactly who's responsible for this disaster. He turned and left, his footsteps fading into the distance. Elin stood alone in her forge, the hammer heavy in her hand, Thomas's words echoing in her skull. Was he right? Had she gotten Ronan killed with her stubborn refusal? No. She rejected the thought violently, almost physically. Ronan was a king. He'd made his own choices long before she entered the picture. The hunting party was necessary, regardless of their whatever they had. The wolves would have attacked with or without her rejection, but doubt, once planted, was hard to kill. Elin threw herself back into her work, trying to drown Thomas's voice with the sound of metal on metal. She finished the Henderson blade, started on a new project, reinforced hinges for the community hall doors, something practical, something that might save lives. The afternoon crawled by, the howling grew louder, closer, and still Ronan didn't return. She was deep in the rhythm of hammering when another sound cut through her concentration. Hoofbeats. Fast. Desperate. Elin dropped her tools and ran to the door. A lone rider came thundering up the path, his horse lathered and wild-eyed. She recognized him, young Michael Torres, barely 20, one of Ronan's personal guards. He nearly fell off his horse in his haste to dismount. "The forge!" he gasped. "Need the forge! Weapons damaged! Wolves! There were more than we thought. 50, maybe 60. We're falling back." Elin's heart lurched. "Where's Ronan?" "Alive. For now. But we lost 8 men in the first engagement, and half our weapons are broken or dull." Michael was shaking, whether from fear or cold she couldn't tell. "The king sent me back, said if anyone could reforge blades fast enough to matter, it was you." Something fierce and hot blazed through Elin's chest. Ronan, in the middle of a desperate fight, had thought of her, had trusted her. "How long do I have?" "They're trying to hold the ridge line, maybe an hour before they have to retreat completely." Michael pulled a bundle from his saddle, 6 broken swords, bent spear tips, damaged axes. He said to focus on these, the best weapons. Make them usable again. Elin grabbed the bundle, her mind already racing through the work ahead. An hour to repair 6 weapons that should take half a day each. It was impossible. She'd have to make it possible. "Tell Ronan I'll have them ready," she said. "You can't—" "Tell him." Michael stared at her, then nodded and swung back onto his horse. He was gone in a spray of frozen dirt, racing back toward the ridge line. Elin ran back to her forge. An hour, 6 weapons, impossible odds. She'd faced worse. The first sword was shattered at the midpoint, a clean break, which meant she could re-weld it if she worked fast enough. She thrust it into the forge fire, pumping the bellows until the flames roared white-hot. While the metal heated, she assessed the other weapons. 2 axes with bent heads, those could be reforged quickly. A spear with a split tip that needed careful work or it would break again in the first thrust. Another sword with a shattered crossguard. A warhammer with a cracked handle. Too much work, too little time. Elin made a decision. She'd focus on the 3 weapons that could be salvaged fastest. The re-welded sword, the 2 axes. The others would have to wait. She pulled the glowing sword from the forge and began hammering with a fury she'd never felt before. Each strike had to count. Each blow had to be perfect. There was no room for error, no time for second-guessing. Sweat poured down her face despite the cold. Her shoulders screamed. Her hands, calloused as they were, began to blister. She didn't stop. The first sword came together in 20 minutes, a record even for her. She plunged it into the water, watched the steam rise, then set it aside and grabbed the first axe. Somewhere in the distance she heard shouts, combat. The wolves were getting closer.
Elin worked faster. The axe head was easier, just a matter of heating it cherry red and hammering out the bend. 15 minutes. Done. Second axe. The head was worse, twisted nearly sideways. She'd have to heat it twice, work it in stages. More shouting, closer now. She could hear individual voices, recognize words. Fall back! Hold the line! They're flanking us! Her hands shook. She forced them steady and kept hammering. The second axe took 18 minutes. Good enough. She moved to the spear, knowing it was a risk, knowing she might not have time. The door to her forge burst open. 3 men stumbled in, bloody and wild-eyed. She recognized them. Farmers. Part of Ronan's hunting party. One had a gash across his chest. Another was limping badly. The third looked unharmed, but terrified. We can't hold them, the uninjured one gasped. The king's orders. Fall back to the village. Fortify what we can. Where's Ronan? Elin demanded. Still on the ridge with the rear guard, buying us time to retreat. The man's eyes were haunted. We lost 15 more, maybe 20. The pack split up, came at us from 3 sides. It's a slaughter out there. Elin felt ice flood her veins. 23 men dead, maybe more. And Ronan was still out there, holding a line that couldn't be held. You need to evacuate, the injured man said, pressing a hand to his bleeding chest. Get to the community hall. The wolves will be here within the hour. No. All 3 men stared at her. This forge is stone and iron, Elin said, her voice hard. It'll hold better than most of the buildings in this village. If we're going to make a stand anywhere, it should be here. That's insane, the limping man protested. The hall has 300 people crammed into a space meant for half that many. It has fear and panic and no room to fight. Elin grabbed the repaired weapons. This forge has space, heat, and a woman who knows how to use both. Your choice, go cower with the others or stay and fight. The 3 men exchanged glances. Thomas was right, the uninjured one muttered. You are crazy. Crazy and alive beats sane and dead. Elin thrust the rewelded sword at him. Take this. You 2, grab the axes. If you're staying, make yourselves useful. To her surprise, they took the weapons. What do you need us to do? The injured man asked. Elin's mind raced. The forge was defensible, but not invulnerable. She needed to turn it into a fortress, and fast. You, she pointed to the limping man, gather anything that burns. Wood, oil, cloth. Pile it outside in a perimeter. We'll light it when the wolves get close. They won't cross fire if they can help it. You, she pointed to the injured man. Find something to bind that wound and then start hauling water from the well. Fill every bucket, every trough. If the fire spreads, we'll need to control it. And me, the uninjured one asked, help me barricade the doors and windows. Anything heavy, anything solid. We turn this forge into a box they can't crack. For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly the 3 men nodded and scattered to their tasks. Elin went back to her anvil. The spear still needed work, and now she had a new problem. She needed to arm herself. She'd never forged a weapon for herself before, never needed to. But if wolves were coming, if this was going to be her last stand, she grabbed a length of good steel and thrust it into the forge. Outside, she could hear the men working, the crackle of kindling being arranged, the slosh of water, the scrape of furniture being dragged to barricade the entrance. Inside, she hammered with everything she had. The blade took shape under her hands, not a sword, which she'd never trained with, but something simpler, more brutal, a long, heavy blade with a reinforced tang, meant for chopping more than stabbing, something that could take a beating and keep cutting, something that matched her. She was quenching the blade when more men arrived, remnants of the hunting party, bloodied and desperate. Then more, and more. By the time the sun touched the horizon, 27 men had gathered at her forge, the survivors of Ronan's 53, and Ronan wasn't among them. Where's the king? Elin demanded of Marcus Chen, who'd arrived in the last group. Marcus's face was gray. Rear guard. He stayed with 5 others to buy us time to retreat. Said he'd follow us in, but what? But that was 30 minutes ago, and we haven't seen any sign of them. Marcus's voice cracked. Elin, I think they didn't make it. The words hit her like a physical blow.
Ronan was dead. The man who'd spent 37 mornings asking for her heart, the king who'd chosen patience over power, was dead on some frozen ridge, torn apart by wolves he'd faced to protect people who barely acknowledged him. And she'd never told him yes. "No," Elin said. "Elin, we have to accept—" "No." She grabbed the blade she'd just forged, testing its weight. "He's alive. He's coming back. You can't know that." "I know." She said it with absolute certainty, the same way she knew when steel was properly tempered, when iron would hold or break. "He's coming back. And when he does, this forge will be ready." Marcus stared at her, then slowly nodded. "What do you need us to do?" What followed was organized chaos. 27 men transformed Elin's forge into a makeshift fortress, working with the desperate efficiency of those who knew death was coming. They piled combustibles in a wide ring around the building: wood, hay, oil-soaked rags. They barricaded every opening except the main door, which they reinforced with iron bars from Elin's stock. They hauled water, sharpened weapons, and prepared for the fight of their lives. And through it all, Elin kept one eye on the path from the ridge, watching for Ronan. He didn't come. The sun sank lower. The howling grew deafening, and still no sign of the rear guard. "They're here," someone whispered. Elin looked up from the torch she was preparing and saw them. Wolves, dozens of them, emerging from the forest like ghosts, their eyes reflecting the last of the daylight in eerie green flashes. They moved with the fluid coordination of a pack that had hunted together for years, spreading out to surround the forge. "Light the fires," Elin commanded. Torches flew. The perimeter of combustibles caught with a whoosh that made even the wolves pause. Flames leaped 6 feet high, creating a barrier of heat and light around the forge. For a moment, it worked. The wolves backed off, circling but not attacking. Then one, larger than the others, with a scarred muzzle, threw back its head and howled. The sound cut through the roar of flames like a knife through silk. And the pack charged. "Brace it!" Marcus shouted. The wolves hit the fire line and recoiled, yelping, but they didn't retreat. They circled, looking for weaknesses, testing the barrier. One found a gap where the flames had burned lower. It leaped through in a blur of gray fur and snapping jaws. Elin met it with her new blade. The impact jarred her arms to the shoulders, but the blade held. The wolf fell, and she yanked the weapon free just in time to face the next one. All around her, men shouted and fought. Steel clashed against fangs, fire roared. Blood, human and animal, splashed across frozen ground. This was chaos, this was war, and Elin fought like she'd been born to it. A wolf lunged at her left side. She pivoted, bringing her blade around in a wide arc that caught it mid-leap. It crashed into her anyway, dead weight that knocked her back 3 steps. She shoved it off and kept moving. "The east side!" someone screamed. "They're breaking through!" Elin spun and saw flames dying on the eastern perimeter, wolves pouring through the gap. Too many, too fast. They were going to be overrun. Then, from somewhere in the chaos, a voice roared. Familiar, commanding, alive. "For Brim Hollow!" Ronan Vale crashed through the wolf pack like a storm-given human form, his sword red with blood, his face twisted in fury. Behind him came the other 5 members of the rear guard, just as bloodied, just as furious. They hit the wolves from behind, and the pack's perfect coordination shattered. "Ronan!" Elin shouted, relief and fury and something fiercer flooding through her. He fought his way toward her, cutting down wolves with brutal efficiency. When he reached her, their eyes met for just a second. "You're still here," he said. "So are you." Stubborn woman. Reckless king. Then there was no more time for words, because the wolves rallied and came at them again. But now Ronan fought beside her, and somehow that changed everything. They moved together without planning, without speaking. He guarded her left, she guarded his right. When he struck high, she struck low. When she advanced, he covered her retreat. It was like the forge, she realized dimly. Like the dance of hammer and anvil, fire and iron. 2 forces working in perfect synchronization to create something stronger than either could manage alone. Around them, the battle raged. Men fell. Wolves fell. The fire began to die and shadows crept closer. But Elin and Ronan held the center,
and as long as they held, the forge didn't fall. A wolf, the scarred leader, came at Ronan's blind side. Elin saw it a heartbeat before impact and threw herself between them. Her blade caught it in the throat, but its momentum carried it forward. She felt claws rake across her shoulder, felt the hot rush of blood, felt herself falling. Ronan caught her. His arm locked around her waist, keeping her upright even as he drove his sword through another wolf's skull. "I've got you," he said. And somehow, impossibly, she believed him. The fight seemed to last hours. It probably lasted minutes. When it finally ended, when the last wolf fled yelping into the darkness, 27 men stood in a circle of carnage, breathing hard, covered in blood. And in the center, Elin Maris leaned against Ronan Vale, her shoulders screaming, her hands shaking, her heart pounding with the fierce joy of survival. "You came back," she said quietly. "I told you I would. You almost died. So did you." She laughed, a ragged, desperate sound. "Thomas was right. We're both insane." "Probably." Ronan's arm tightened around her. "But we're alive." Around them, men were taking stock of the damage. 3 more dead in the final fight. Twice that wounded. The forge was intact, but barely. They'd survived. Against all odds, against a force that should have destroyed them, they'd survived. "Elin," Ronan said softly. She looked up at him, seeing him clearly for the first time since that morning, blood-spattered, exhausted, magnificent. "Yeah? Tomorrow morning, when I come to ask you—" "Yes," she interrupted. He blinked. "What?" "Yes. The answer is yes." Elin's voice was steady, despite the pain, despite the fear, despite everything. "You were right. The answer changed." Ronan stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, his face transformed, pain and exhaustion giving way to something that looked like wonder. "You mean it?" "I mean it." He kissed her then, right there in the ruins of battle, surrounded by blood and bodies and men too exhausted to care. And Elin kissed him back, tasting smoke and copper and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, Marcus was staring at them with an expression somewhere between shock and exasperation. "About damn time," he muttered. Several of the other men laughed, broken, relieved laughter that had nothing to do with humor and everything to do with being alive when they shouldn't be. The crisis wasn't over. The pack might return. The village still needed defending. There were wounded to tend, dead to bury, walls to rebuild. But standing there in her forge with Ronan's arm around her shoulders, and yes, finally spoken, Elin felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not hope. Something fiercer. Certainty. This was right. He was right. They were right. And whatever came next, they'd face it together. The wounded came first. Elin barely had time to catch her breath before men started stumbling toward the forge, clutching injuries that ranged from shallow gashes to wounds that wouldn't stop bleeding. Her shoulder throbbed where the wolf's claws had raked her, but she pushed the pain aside and moved into action. "Get them inside," she ordered, gesturing to the forge's interior. "Lay them near the fire. We need light and heat to work." Ronan released her, though his hand lingered on her uninjured arm for just a moment. "I'll organize the perimeter. Make sure no wolves circle back. Be careful." "Always am." He flashed her a tired smile, then turned to bark orders at the surviving men. Inside the forge, chaos reigned. 10 men with varying degrees of injury, all of them looking at her with desperate hope, as if being the woman who'd said yes to a king somehow made her capable of miracles. Elin wasn't a healer. She was a blacksmith. She knew metal, not flesh. But she also knew fire, knew how to cauterize, knew enough battlefield medicine from her father's stories to keep men alive if she moved fast and didn't hesitate. "You," she pointed to Jacob Mills, one of the uninjured fighters. "Boil water, clean cloth, anything that hasn't touched the ground. Move." Jacob scrambled to obey. "You." She pointed to another man. "I need my father's medical kit. It's in the back room. Wooden box with a red mark on the lid. Bring it here." As men rushed to follow her commands, Elin knelt beside the worst case, a young man she didn't recognize, his abdomen torn open by wolf claws. He was maybe 20, with dark hair and eyes that kept rolling back in his head. She pressed her hands against the wound, trying to slow the bleeding. Hot blood welled between her fingers. "Stay with me," she said firmly. "What's your name?" Daniel, he gasped. "Daniel Frost. From the Eastern Farms." "Well, Daniel, from the Eastern Farms, you're going to be fine. But I need you to stay conscious. Can you do that?" He nodded weakly. The medical kit arrived. Elin's hands, so steady at the forge, shook slightly as she opened it. Inside were her father's old supplies: needle and gut thread, strips of clean linen, a bottle of harsh alcohol that would serve as both disinfectant and painkiller. She worked fast. The worst wounds got stitched first, her blacksmith's precision translating surprisingly well to flesh. The men who could wait did. The men who couldn't got her immediate attention, even as her own shoulder screamed protest with every movement. Time blurred. She stitched and bandaged, cauterized and cleaned, moving from one wounded man to the next in a haze of focus and exhaustion. Outside, she could hear Ronan coordinating the defense, organizing watch rotations, reinforcing weak points, preparing for another attack. Because another attack would come. She was certain of it. The alpha wolf had fled but not died, and a starving pack didn't give up after one failed assault. She was binding the last wound, a deep gash on Marcus Chen's forearm, when footsteps echoed outside the forge. Multiple sets, moving with purpose. Elin looked up to see Thomas Ray entering, flanked by 5 other council members. All of them looked grim. "We need to talk," Thomas said without preamble. Elin finished tying off Marcus's bandage, then stood. Her shoulder protested violently, and she had to bite back a gasp. "About what?" "About the fact that you've turned this forge into a fortress without council authorization." Thomas's voice was hard. "About the fact that you've countermanded evacuation orders. About the fact that 3 more men are dead because you refused to retreat to the community hall like everyone else." Around the forge, wounded men shifted uncomfortably. Even Marcus, usually diplomatic, looked uncertain. "Those 3 men died fighting wolves," Elin said quietly. "They would have died in the hall too when the pack broke through. At least here, they died with weapons in their hands." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Elin's voice hardened. "The hall has stone walls but wooden doors. The wolves would have smelled 300 terrified people packed inside like livestock. They would have torn through those doors in minutes, and then it would have been a massacre." "That's speculation," another council member, Helen York, interjected. "You're not a strategist. You're a blacksmith who got lucky." "Lucky?" Elin's laugh was bitter. 26 men defended this position against a pack of 60 wolves and survived. That's not luck. That's tactics, preparation, and people who knew how to fight instead of cowering. "You had the king," Thomas said flatly. "That's the only reason you survived, and now you've trapped him here, away from the community hall where he should be coordinating the overall defense." Elin felt rage flare hot in her chest. "I didn't trap anyone. Ronan made his own choice." "Did he? Or did he make the choice a lovesick fool makes when the woman he's been chasing for weeks is in danger?" Thomas stepped closer, his face hard. "You said yes to him tonight, in front of witnesses. Do you have any idea what that means?" "It means I accepted his offer to mate." "It means you've tied the king's fate to yours." Helen's voice was sharp. "Every decision he makes now will be colored by his need to protect you. Every risk he takes will be calculated based on keeping you alive. You've made him vulnerable, Elin. You've made all of us vulnerable." The words stung because they carried an edge of truth. Ronan had fought like a man possessed tonight, and more than once she'd seen him position himself between her and danger without regard for his own safety. "That's not—" "It is." Thomas's voice was flat. "And the council has voted. You will evacuate to the community hall immediately. The king will come with you. This forge will be abandoned, and we'll consolidate our defenses in one location." "No." Every head in the forge turned to the doorway. Ronan stood there, still covered in dried blood, his expression carved from stone. Behind him, the men who'd fought at the forge formed a silent wall of support. "Your Majesty," Thomas began, the council has no authority over my mate." Ronan's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute command. "And it has no authority over my tactical decisions." "We're trying to save lives," Helen protested. "So am I." Ronan moved into the forge, and men stepped aside to let him pass. "The forge holds. It's proven defensible. It has fire, water, weapons, and a woman who knows how to use all three. Abandoning it now would be strategic suicide.
The community hall is a trap waiting to spring. Ronan cut Thomas off.
Stone walls, yes, but wooden doors, no secondary exits, and too many people in too small a space. The moment the wolves breach those doors, and they will breach them, everyone inside dies.
You don't know that, Thomas argued.
Yes, I do. I've seen it before.
Ronan's voice was harsh.
5 years ago, during the Northern Uprising, a village called Crow's Rest tried to hide their entire population in their meeting hall. The raiders set it on fire. 300 people burned alive because they had no way out. Silence fell like a hammer.
This isn't raiders, Helen said weakly. No, it's worse. Raiders can be reasoned with, bribed, scared off. Starving wolves can't. Ronan's eyes swept the council members. We hold multiple positions. We spread the pack's attention. We make them work for every kill, and we make sure they pay in blood for every life they take. That's how we survive. And if we don't, Thomas's voice was barely a whisper, then we die fighting instead of cowering.
Ronan's jaw was set. I'm the king. This is my decision. The forge holds. Anyone who wants to fight has a place here. Anyone who doesn't can return to the hall. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Thomas shook his head slowly. You've lost your mind. Both of you. Maybe, Elin said quietly. But we're alive. The council members left in silence, their disapproval hanging in the air like smoke. When they were gone, Ronan turned to face the assembled men, wounded and healthy alike. Anyone who wants to leave, go now, he said. No judgment, no shame. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Not a single man moved. Ronan's expression softened slightly. Then we prepare. The wolves will be back, probably at dawn when we're tired and our fires are low. We need to be ready. The night that followed was a strange combination of frantic preparation and exhausted waiting. Men slept in shifts while others kept watch. Elin moved between tending the wounded and reinforcing their defenses, running on sheer stubbornness when her body begged for rest. Ronan stayed close, and she found herself acutely aware of his presence, the way he positioned himself to guard her back, the way his eyes tracked her movements, the way he seemed to know when she was about to collapse from exhaustion and appear with water or food, or just a steadying hand.
You need to rest, he said quietly, catching her as she swayed while checking on Daniel Frost. So do you. I'm not the one who's been stitching wounds for 3 hours with an injured shoulder. I'm fine. You're bleeding through your bandage. Elin looked down and saw he was right. Fresh blood had soaked through the makeshift dressing on her shoulder. It's nothing. It's an infection waiting to happen. Ronan's voice was firm. Let me look at it.
She wanted to argue, but exhaustion was making her dizzy. She let him guide her to a quiet corner of the forge, away from the wounded men. His hands were surprisingly gentle as he unwrapped her shoulder. The wounds weren't deep, but they were angry and inflamed, dirt and fabric embedded in the torn flesh. This needs to be cleaned properly, Ronan said quietly, after the crisis. Now! He grabbed the bottle of alcohol from the medical kit. This is going to hurt.
I've been hurt worse. The alcohol hit her wounds, and Elin's world went white with pain. She bit down on her lip hard enough to taste blood, refusing to cry out. Ronan worked quickly, cleaning the wounds with efficient precision that spoke of experience. When he was done, he bandaged her shoulder with strips of clean linen, his movements careful and sure. Where did you learn that? Elin asked through gritted teeth. 5 years of border conflicts, Ronan's voice was matter-of-fact.
When you lead from the front, you learn battlefield medicine fast. The council thinks you're making bad decisions because of me. The council thinks everyone makes bad decisions if those decisions don't align with their fear. Ronan tied off the bandage. They're wrong about you. They're wrong about this.
Are they? Elin met his eyes. Be honest. Would you have made the same tactical choice if I wasn't here? Ronan was quiet for a long moment.
When he spoke, his voice was low and honest. I don't know, maybe not. But that doesn't make it the wrong choice. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. You were right about the hall being a trap. You were right about the forge being defensible. The fact that I want to protect you doesn't make those observations less valid. Thomas said your judgment is compromised. Thomas is terrified and looking for someone to blame. Ronan's eyes held hers. But I'll ask you directly. Do you think my judgment is compromised? Elin thought about it. Really thought about it. Reviewed every decision Ronan had made since the crisis began. The hunting party. Necessary regardless of their relationship. The retreat to the village. Tactically sound. The defense of the forge. Brilliant improvisation. Even staying close to her could be justified as protecting his most valuable defensive asset, the person who knew the terrain and resources best. No, she said finally, I don't think your judgment is compromised. I think you're doing the best anyone could in an impossible situation. Something in Ronan's expression eased. Good, because I'm going to need you to trust that judgment in the next few hours. Why? Because I'm going to do something the council will hate even more than defending this forge. Before Elin could ask what he meant, a shout went up from the perimeter. Movement! Northern approach! Both of them were on their feet instantly, exhaustion forgotten. Ronan grabbed his sword, Elin grabbed her blade. They ran to the forge entrance where men were already gathering, weapons ready, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the dying firelight. How many? Ronan demanded. Can't tell, Marcus replied, his voice tight. Could be scouts, could be the whole pack. They waited, the silence stretching like iron on an anvil. Then from the darkness, a figure emerged. Not a wolf, a woman. She walked slowly, deliberately, her hands raised to show she carried no weapons. She was perhaps 40, with iron-gray hair braided back from a face that was all sharp angles and harder eyes. She wore furs and leather, practical clothing that spoke of life on the move, and she walked without fear, despite the armed men facing her. Hold! Ronan commanded as several men raised weapons. Let her approach. The woman stopped just outside the forge's light, close enough to be seen clearly but far enough to run if needed. Alpha King Ronan Vale, she said, her voice carrying easily across the distance. I've been looking for you. Who are you? My name is Vera Blackwood. I lead the northern packs, the human ones, not the wolves. Her smile was cold. Though the distinction sometimes feels academic, Elin felt ice slide down her spine. The northern packs were semi-nomadic groups that lived beyond the territory's borders, surviving through hunting, raiding, and whatever other means necessary. They were feared, respected, and almost never seen this far south. What do you want? Ronan's voice was carefully neutral. To make a deal. Vera's eyes swept the assembled men, lingering on the wounded, the exhausted defenders, the makeshift fortifications. You're fighting a war you can't win. That wolf pack, they're not going to stop. They're going to keep coming until everyone in this village is dead or they are. We're holding. For now, but you've got what, 30 men still fighting against a pack of 50 wolves? Vera shook her head. The math doesn't work, King. You know it doesn't. Then why are you here? Because I can make it work. Vera took a step closer. My people have been tracking that pack for 3 weeks. We know their patterns, their weak points, their territory. We can help you kill them. At what price? Smart man. Vera's smile widened. My price is simple. When this is over, you grant the northern pack safe passage through your territories. We're running from something worse than wolves, and we need to go south. Winter's coming early in the far north, and it's going to be brutal. We need access to warmer lands. Murmurs rippled through the assembled men. Granting the northern pack safe passage meant opening the territories to groups known for raiding, theft, and violence. How many people? Ronan asked. 300, mostly women and children, about 60 fighters. Vera's expression was flat. We're not raiders anymore, King. We're refugees. The choice is yours. Let us pass peacefully, or watch your village get torn apart by wolves while we move on. That's not a choice. That's extortion. Call it what you want. I call it survival. Vera's eyes were hard. You help us. We help you. Simple transaction. Ronan was quiet for a long moment. Elin could see the calculations running behind his eyes, weighing the options. How do I know you'll keep your word? He asked finally. You don't? But then, I don't know you'll keep yours either. Vera shrugged. That's what makes it a deal. Both sides take a risk. And if I refuse? Then I take my people around your territories, the wolves finish what they started here, and everyone loses. Vera's voice was matter-of-fact. Except maybe the wolves. Elin watched Ronan's face, saw the moment he came to a decision. The council will never approve this, he said quietly. The council isn't here. You are. Vera's smile returned. And from what I hear, you've been making your own decisions all day. What's one more? Ronan glanced at Elin. She read the question in his eyes clearly. What do you think? She thought about Thomas's accusations, about compromised judgment, about the weight of being responsible for a king's choices. Then she thought about 30 exhausted men facing 50 starving wolves with no reinforcements, no rest, and no hope. Do it, she said quietly. Ronan's eyes held hers for one more heartbeat. Then he turned back to Vera. You have a deal. Help us kill the pack, and I'll grant your people safe passage and settlement rights in the southern territories. Settlement rights? Vera's eyebrows rose. That's more than I asked for. It's also more stable than wandering. You said you're refugees, not raiders. Prove it. Help us survive this, then help us rebuild. We'll give you land, resources, and protection. For the first time, Vera's hard expression cracked slightly, showing something that might have been surprise or might have been hope. You're either very wise or very desperate, King. Both, Ronan said flatly. When can your people be here? They're already surrounding the village, 50 fighters ready to move on your word. Vera's smile returned, sharper now. I told you, I've been tracking these wolves for weeks. I know when and where they'll strike next. When? Dawn. They'll hit the community hall, biggest concentration of prey, easiest to panic. They'll expect most of your fighters to be there. Vera looked around the forge. They won't expect this. A trap, Elin said slowly, understanding dawning. Exactly. Vera's eyes gleamed. We let them commit to the hall attack. Then we hit them from 3 sides. Your men from the forge, my fighters from the north and east. We catch them in a kill box and end this. People in the hall will die, Marcus said quietly. Some will, Vera agreed, but fewer than if we let the wolves hunt freely, and far fewer than if we do nothing. It was brutal calculus, the kind that made Elin's stomach turn, but it was also logical. We need to warn the hall, she said. Give them time to prepare. No, Vera's voice was flat. The wolves are watching. They're smart enough to know when prey is expecting them. We warn the hall, the wolves change tactics, and we lose our advantage. You're asking us to use our own people as bait, Ronan said quietly. I'm asking you to make the hard choice. Vera met his eyes without flinching. Save some or watch all of them die. You're the king. Decide. The silence that followed was suffocating. Elin watched Ronan, saw the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a physical thing. This was what kingship meant. Not crowns and ceremonies, but impossible choices made in the dark with lives hanging in the balance. We warn them, Ronan said finally, but subtly. We send a runner to the hall with orders to reinforce the doors and prepare defensive positions without making it obvious. The wolves will see increased activity, but not enough to make them change plans entirely. Vera considered this, then nodded slowly. Risky, but it might work. It has to work. Ronan's voice was steel. Because I won't sacrifice my people like livestock, even to save them. Noble. Vera's tone was unreadable. Hopefully not stupid. We move in 2 hours. Get your men ready. She melted back into the darkness as silently as she'd appeared. The moment she was gone, chaos erupted. You can't trust her, Marcus said immediately. The northern packs are our only chance, Ronan cut him off. You saw the numbers. We're down to 30 fighters, half of them wounded. Without reinforcements, we die. It's that simple. She could be leading us into a trap. She could be. Ronan's eyes were hard. But if she wanted us dead, all she had to do was let the wolves finish the job. Instead, she offered help. That's not the action of an enemy. It's the action of someone who wants something, Elin said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She needs safe passage badly enough to risk her fighters helping us. That desperation makes her more reliable, not less. Desperate people keep their word because they can't afford not to. Listen to her, Ronan said. She's right. Vera needs this deal as much as we do. That makes her trustworthy enough for now. And later, Marcus pressed, when the wolves are dead and 300 northerners are inside our borders? Later, we deal with later. Ronan's voice was firm. Right now, we prepare. Marcus, I need you to run to the community hall. Tell them to reinforce the doors and prepare defensive positions, but do it quietly. No panic, no obvious preparations. What do I tell the council? Tell them the king is coordinating a defensive strategy and needs their cooperation. Ronan's smile was thin. Don't mention Vera or the northern packs. Not yet. Marcus nodded reluctantly and left. The next 2 hours were a blur of preparation. Ronan organized the fighters into 3 groups, one to hold the forge, one to support the hall from the outside, and one to coordinate with Vera's people. Weapons were checked, positions planned, contingencies prepared. Elin worked beside him, her blacksmith's mind helping to solve tactical problems. Where to position fighters for maximum coverage. How to create choke points. Which weapons would work best in close quarters versus open ground. It was strange working with him like this. Not as king and subject, not even as mates, but as equals solving a problem together. His strategic thinking complemented her practical knowledge. Her understanding of terrain and materials enhanced his tactical plans. They were good together, she realized. Not because some mystical mate bond, but because their skills aligned. Their thinking complemented each other's. Their stubborn refusal to quit matched perfectly. You're smiling, Ronan said quietly, catching her expression as they reviewed final positions. Inappropriate timing? Probably. His own smile flickered. But I'll take it. I was just thinking that Thomas was right about one thing. What's that? We are insane. Elin looked at him directly. We're about to fight alongside raiders we don't trust, using our own people as bait, against wolves that outnumber us 2-1. It's completely insane. And yet I can't think of a better plan. She shook her head. So either we're brilliant or we're about to get everyone killed. Could be both. Could be. A comfortable silence fell between them. Around the forge, men prepared for battle with the grim efficiency of those who knew death was coming. The wounded who could fight checked their weapons. The wounded who couldn't offered what help they could. It was almost peaceful in a terrible sort of way. Then Vera appeared again, moving like smoke through the shadows. It's time, she said. The pack is gathering. They'll move in 30 minutes. Ronan nodded. Positions. Men moved with quiet precision, taking up their assigned positions. The forge fell into tense silence, broken only by the crack of dying fires and the distant howling. Elin gripped her blade, feeling its weight, remembering the hours she'd spent forging it. A weapon made in desperation, never meant to be used. Now it might be all that kept her alive. Ronan stood beside her, his presence solid and real in the darkness. His hand found hers, squeezed once. Whatever happens, he said quietly, I'm glad you said yes. Me too. The howling grew louder, closer. Through the darkness, Elin could see shapes moving, wolves, dozens of them, circling the village like ghosts. They were gathering for the final assault, and somewhere in that mass of fur and fangs was the Alpha, the scarred leader who'd escaped the first battle. This time, he wouldn't escape. This time, it ended. One way or another. The wolves charged, not at the forge, at the community hall, exactly as Vera had predicted. The pack hit the wooden doors like a battering ram, and even from a distance, Elin could hear the screams. Hold, Ronan commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. Let them commit. It was agony, waiting while people died. Every instinct screamed at Elin to run toward the hall, to help, to do something. But tactics required patience. The wolves battered at the hall doors, some breaking off to circle the building, looking for weaknesses. The defenders inside fought back. Elin could hear shouted orders, the clash of improvised weapons, more screams. Then, from 3 sides at once, Vera's people struck. They came out of the darkness like vengeance, 50 fighters moving with brutal precision. They hit the wolves from behind, from the sides, coordinating their attacks with devastating efficiency. The pack's attention split. Confusion rippled through their ranks. Now, Ronan shouted. The forge fighters charged. Elin ran with them, her blade ready, her heart pounding. They hit the wolf pack's flank, catching them between 3 forces, creating the kill box Vera had described. What followed was carnage. Wolves died. Humans died. The ground turned red with blood from both species. Elin fought like something possessed, her blade rising and falling, her body moving on pure instinct. Beside her, Ronan was a force of nature, his sword never still, his commands cutting through the chaos. Around them, Vera's people fought with cold efficiency, taking down wolves with practiced ease. And slowly, impossibly, the tide turned. The pack began to break, wolves fleeing into the darkness, their coordination shattered. But the alpha remained. Elin saw him across the battlefield, the scarred wolf, larger than the others, his eyes fixed not on the fleeing pack but on Ronan. "Ronan!" she screamed. "Behind you!" He turned just as the alpha leaped. The impact took both of them down, man and wolf crashing to the frozen ground in a tangle of limbs and fury. Ronan's sword went flying, skittering across blood-slicked ground. The alpha's jaws snapped for Ronan's throat. Elin didn't think. She just moved. Her blade took the alpha in the ribs, driving deep. The wolf twisted, those terrible jaws coming for her instead. She felt teeth close on her arm, felt bone crack, felt white-hot pain explode through her body. Then Ronan was there, his hands closing around the alpha's throat, choking, crushing. The wolf thrashed, but Ronan held on with desperate strength. Elin yanked her blade free and struck again, and again. The alpha's grip on her arm loosened, weakened, released. The great wolf collapsed, blood pouring from multiple wounds, its breathing ragged and labored. Ronan grabbed his sword and drove it through the alpha's heart. The wolf shuddered once and went still. Around them, the battle was ending. The pack scattered, broken, fleeing into the wilderness. Vera's people pursued, finishing stragglers. Silence fell, broken, bloody silence. Elin looked down at her arm. The bone was definitely broken, the flesh torn. Blood poured from the wounds. "Elin," Ronan said, his voice rough with fear. "I'm okay," she lied. "You're not. I'm alive." She swayed and he caught her. "We're alive. You saved me. You saved me first." Her vision was going gray at the edges. "I think we're even." Then the world tilted and darkness claimed her. The last thing she felt was Ronan's arms around her, holding her like she was something precious, something worth saving, something worth dying for. Pain dragged Elin back to consciousness. Not the sharp agony of fresh wounds, but the deep throbbing ache of broken bones being set. She surfaced slowly, awareness returning in fragments. The warmth of fire, the smell of herbs and alcohol. Voices low and urgent, speaking somewhere above her head. Can't believe she threw herself at that thing. Saved the king's life. Arms shattered. Don't know if she'll ever swing a hammer again. That last one cut through the haze like a blade through flesh. Never swing a hammer again. Never work the forge. Never create. Elin's eyes snapped open. She was lying on a makeshift cot inside her forge, surrounded by people she didn't immediately recognize. Her right arm was splinted and bandaged, immobilized against her chest. Every breath sent waves of pain radiating from the injury. She's awake. The voice belonged to a woman, older, with weathered hands that smelled of medicinal herbs. "Easy, girl, you've been out for 6 hours." Elin tried to sit up. The world spun violently, and hands pushed her gently back down. "Where's Ronan?" Her voice came out as a rasp. "Dealing with the aftermath." The herb woman, a healer, Elin realized, pressed a cup to her lips. "Drink. It'll help with the pain." The liquid was bitter, but Elin drank it anyway. As the medicine began to work, dulling the worst of the agony, her mind cleared enough to process her surroundings. The forge was crowded with wounded, more than before. The community hall must have taken casualties when the wolves attacked. "How many?" Elin asked. "Dead?" 17 from the hall, 8 from the forge defense, 3 of Vera's people. The healer's face was grim. "Could have been worse. Would have been worse, if not for you and the king's plan." "The wolves?" "Scattered. Dead, mostly. Vera's hunters are tracking the survivors, but the pack's broken. They won't be back." The healer began checking Elin's other injuries. The shoulder wounds from the first attack, various cuts and bruises. "You fought well for a blacksmith." "My father taught me." Elin's eyes found her injured arm. Can I still work?" The healer was quiet for a long moment, too long. "The bone will heal," she said finally, but it was a bad break, multiple fractures. Even with perfect care, there's no guarantee you'll regain full use of the arm. The words hung in the air like smoke. No guarantee. Elin felt something crack inside her chest. Not bone, but something deeper. Her forge, her independence. Her entire identity was built on her ability to work metal. Without that, who was she? I need to see it, she said. That's not... I need to see it. The healer sighed, but carefully unwrapped enough of the bandage to reveal the damage. Elin's arm was swollen to twice its normal size, mottled with bruises that ranged from purple to black. The splint held the bones in place, but she could see the unnatural angles, feel the wrongness even through the medicine's numbing effects. The wolf's bite went deep, the healer explained quietly. Shattered the radius and ulna both. I've set the bones as best I can, but the real question is whether the nerves and tendons will heal properly. That takes time and prayer and luck. Elin stared at her ruined arm, feeling the weight of everything she might have lost. Then she heard footsteps, and Ronan appeared in her line of sight. He looked terrible, still covered in dried blood, his face haggard with exhaustion, his eyes shadowed. But when he saw her awake, something in his expression eased. "You're up," he said quietly. "So are you." "Can't rest yet. Too much to do." He knelt beside her cot, and his hand found her good one, squeezing gently. "How do you feel?" "Like I fought a wolf and lost." "You fought a wolf and won. There's a difference." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "You saved my life, Elin." "You've saved mine twice now. I was just evening the score." "This isn't a competition." "Good, because I'd be losing." Elin tried to smile, but it felt wrong on her face. "The healer says I might not be able to work the forge again." She watched his face carefully, looking for pity, for the expression that would tell her she'd become a burden, a broken thing instead of an equal. What she saw instead was fury. "Then the healer doesn't know you very well," Ronan said flatly. "You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. If anyone can beat those odds, it's you." "That's not how bones work. I don't care how bones work. I care that you're alive, and you're here, and you're going to fight like hell to get back to your forge." His eyes held hers. "Because that's who you are. That's who you've always been. And a wolf bite doesn't change that." Despite everything, the pain, the fear, the uncertainty, Elin felt warmth spread through her chest. "You have too much faith in me." "Impossible. I have exactly the right amount." Ronan leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers, gentle and careful. "Rest now. When you wake up, we'll figure out the next steps together." "Together," Elin echoed. The word felt strange and right in equal measure. He kissed her forehead and stood. "I need to deal with the council. They're calling an emergency session about Vera and the northern packs. That's going to be ugly." "Probably." Ronan's smile was tired. "But I made them a promise, and I'm going to keep it, even if the council hates me for it." He left, and Elin drifted back into medicinal sleep, her broken arm throbbing in counterpoint to her heartbeat. When she woke again, the light had changed, late afternoon, judging by the angle of sun through the forge's high windows. The healer was gone, replaced by Sarah Morrison, who sat beside Elin's cot with red-rimmed eyes. "You're an idiot," Sarah said by way of greeting. "Hello to you too. Throwing yourself at a wolf. What were you thinking?" "I was thinking Ronan was about to die." Elin tried to sit up, succeeded this time, though it cost her dearly in pain. "Help me up." "You should rest." "I've rested. Now I need to move before I go crazy." Elin gritted her teeth against the pain. "Please." Sarah helped her stand, one arm around Elin's waist for support. The world tilted alarmingly, but Elin forced herself to stay upright. Around the forge, the wounded were in various states of recovery. Some slept. Others talked quietly, sharing stories of the battle. A few were already trying to move around, testing injured limbs. And in the corner, working at Elin's anvil with careful, unpracticed strokes, was Daniel Frost, the young man she'd stitched back together after the first wolf attack. He was trying to forge something, badly. Elin felt a strange mix of amusement and irritation. Her forge, her tools, being used by someone who clearly had no idea what he was doing. "What are you doing?" she called out. Daniel jumped, nearly dropping the hammer. "Miss Maris, you're awake.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I was just trying to help. The Henderson blade got damaged in the fight, and I thought maybe I could repair it, but I don't really know how, and— Stop, Elin interrupted. Before you ruin my anvil— She made her way over to him, leaning heavily on Sarah. Daniel stepped back immediately, looking sheepish. Elin examined the blade he'd been working on.
It was a mess, overheated in spots, unevenly hammered, the edge completely wrong. "This is terrible," she said bluntly. Daniel's face fell. "I'm sorry, I just wanted to help. But it's salvageable." Elin picked up the blade with her good hand, testing its weight. "The metal's still good. You just need to know what you're doing." "I don't." "Then learn." Elin looked at him directly. "You want to help? Really help?" Daniel nodded eagerly. "Then be my hands." Elin gestured to her ruined arm. "I can't hammer right now, maybe not for months, but I know metal. I know the forge. I can teach you what to do, and you can do the physical work." Really?" Daniel's eyes widened. "You'd trust me with that?" "I'd trust you with following instructions exactly as I give them." Elin's tone was stern. "This isn't a favor. It's work. Hard work. And if you damage my tools through carelessness, I'll kick you out regardless of how many wolf wounds you're recovering from." "Yes, ma'am. I understand." Daniel straightened, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked like a man instead of a terrified boy. "When do we start?" "Now." Elin turned to Sarah. "Get me a chair, high enough to see the anvil clearly." "Elin, you just woke up, and I'll rest when this blade is fixed. Move." Sarah shook her head but obeyed, dragging over a tall stool. Elin settled onto it, her broken arm cradled against her chest, and focused on the damaged blade. "First," she told Daniel, "we need to bring the temperature up slowly. Put it in the forge, but don't pump the bellows yet. Let it heat gradually." Daniel followed her instructions with careful precision. What followed was slow, painstaking work. Elin directed every hammer stroke, every adjustment, every heating and cooling cycle. Daniel's hands did the labor, but her knowledge guided them. It wasn't the same as doing the work herself. Nothing could replace the direct feedback of metal against her own hands. But it was something. It was enough. By the time the blade was properly repaired, Elin was exhausted, and Daniel was sweating despite the cold. But the sword was good. Not perfect. Elin could see a dozen small flaws, but functional, balanced, properly tempered. "You did well," she said. Daniel beamed like she'd handed him a crown. Other wounded men had gathered to watch, and now several of them stepped forward. "Could you teach us too?" one asked. "I mean, not all of us, but some of us might not be good for fighting anymore after the injuries. We need new skills." Elin looked at the assembled men, farmers and merchants and laborers, all of them scarred by the battle, all of them looking for purpose beyond just surviving. "Can you follow instructions?" she asked. They nodded. "Can you work hard without complaining?" More nods. "Then yes, I'll teach you." Elin felt something shift in her chest. Not quite hope, but close. "The forge stays open. We'll need new tools, new weapons, repairs to half the village. There's work enough for a dozen apprentices." The men looked at each other, then back at her with expressions that mixed surprise and gratitude. "Why?" one of them asked. "Why train us when we've got no experience?" "Because I need help, and you need purpose, and Brim Hollow needs a forge that can't be shut down if one person gets injured." Elin's voice was firm. "I built this place alone because I had to, but maybe it's time to build something bigger." She felt Sarah's hand on her shoulder, supportive, proud, and she felt the weight of those watching eyes, men who'd dismissed her for years suddenly seeing her differently. Not as the stubborn woman who refused a king, as the master smith who was rebuilding from the ashes. The forge doors opened and Ronan entered, followed by Vera and several council members. The conversations died. Thomas Ray stepped forward, his face carved from stone. "We need to talk. All of us." Elin forced herself to stand, wobbling only slightly. "Then talk." "The council has reached a decision regarding the northern pacts." Thomas's voice was formal, heavy with disapproval. Against my recommendation, the majority has voted to honor the king's agreement. Vera's people will be granted safe passage and settlement rights in the southern territories. A collective exhale rippled through the room. However, Thomas continued, there are conditions. The northern pacts will be settled in the borderlands, not the interior territories. They will be subject to our laws and governance, and they will provide fighters for the territorial defense forces, 50 men and women, rotating service. Vera's expression didn't change, but Elin saw her eyes flicker to Ronan. Acceptable, Vera said simply. Furthermore, Thomas turned to Elin, and his expression was complicated, anger mixed with something that might have been grudging respect. The Council recognizes that the defense of this forge was instrumental in Brimhollow's survival. The strategic position, the weapons repair, the coordination with the northern fighters, it all originated here. Elin said nothing, waiting. Therefore, the Council is formally establishing this forge as a critical defense installation. You will receive funding for expansion, materials for weapons production, and authorization to train as many apprentices as you deem necessary. Thomas's jaw was tight. The Council was wrong to underestimate the forge's value. We won't make that mistake again. The admission clearly cost him, but it was genuine. I accept, Elin said quietly, on one condition. Thomas's eyebrows rose. You're negotiating with the Council? I'm clarifying terms. Elin's voice was steady. The forge remains mine. My property, my rules, my apprentices. The Council provides funding and materials, but they don't dictate how I run my operation. That's the deal. Elin met his eyes without flinching. I'll make weapons for the defense. I'll train smiths. I'll contribute to Brimhollow's security, but I won't become a Council employee. I built this forge as a free woman, and I'll run it as one. Silence stretched like heated iron. Then, surprisingly, Helen York spoke up. I support those terms. We need her expertise more than we need control over her methods. One by one, other Council members nodded. Finally, Thomas sighed. Fine. The forge remains independent, but you will coordinate with the Defense Committee on weapons requirements. Agreed. Thomas turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Maris, you were right. About the forge, about the defensive position, about all of it. I was wrong to doubt you. It was as close to an apology as she'd ever get from him. Thank you, Elin said simply. The Council members filed out, leaving Ronan, Vera, and a handful of others. Vera approached Elin with her characteristic directness. You fight well, Smith, better than half my trained fighters. I had good motivation. The king? Vera's smile was knowing. Yes, I noticed. You threw yourself at that alpha without hesitation. I'd do it again? I believe you. Vera extended her hand. My people will be settling nearby. We'll need tools, weapons, metalwork for building. I'd like to contract your forge for that work. Elin shook the offered hand with her good one. Fair prices, quality work, no questions about your past. Deal. Vera's grip was strong. I like you, Smith. You're practical. I'm a survivor, same as you. Yes. Vera released her hand. The best kind of person to have as an ally. She left with her characteristic silent grace. Alone with Ronan, Elin finally let herself sit again, exhaustion crashing over her in waves. You just negotiated terms with the Council, Ronan said, his voice holding a note of amusement. While injured, after fighting wolves and saving my life, is there anything you won't do? Rest, apparently. Elin managed a tired smile. How did you convince the Council to vote for the settlement rights? I told them the truth, that without Vera's people, everyone in Brimhollow would be dead. That we owe them not just passage, but partnership. Ronan sat beside her. And I reminded them that as king, I have final authority on territorial defense matters. They could vote against it, but I'd override them anyway. They must have loved that. Thomas looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Ronan's expression grew more serious. But they came around. They're practical people underneath the politics. They see the value in having 50 experienced fighters integrated into our defense. And 300 potential raiders living on our borders? Refugees, Ronan corrected gently. Vera's people aren't raiders anymore. They're families looking for a place to survive the winter. We give them that. We gain allies. We refuse. We make enemies. You really believe that? I believe people become what you treat them as. Ronan's eyes were steady. Treat them as raiders. They'll raid. Treat them as neighbors, as equals, as people deserving of dignity. They'll remember that. Elin studied his face, seeing the idealism there, the hope. You're a better king than they deserve, she said quietly. I'm the king they need. There's a difference. His hand found hers again. And I have you to keep me honest. Is that my role now? Royal conscience? Among other things, Ronan's smile was soft. Mate, partner, the woman who terrifies my counsel and saves my life in equal measure. Don't forget Master Smith. Never. His expression grew serious. About your arm. Don't. Elin shook her head. I don't want pity. I'm not offering pity. I'm offering support. Ronan's voice was firm. Whatever you need to heal, to rebuild, to get back to your forge, you have it. Resources, time, the best healers in the territories. That won't fix broken bones. No, but it might give them the best chance to heal properly. He paused. And in the meantime, you've already found a solution. Training apprentices, directing the work instead of doing all of it yourself. That's adaptation, not surrender. Elin looked at her ruined arm, then at the forge around her, filled with wounded men who were learning a new trade, with tools that would keep working even if she couldn't swing a hammer, with purpose that went beyond her individual ability. Maybe Ronan was right. Maybe this wasn't an ending but a transformation. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. It was the first time she'd said it out loud. Of what? That I won't be me anymore. That without the forge, without being able to do the work myself, I'll just be the king's mate. Nothing more. Ronan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but absolute. You could lose both arms, and you'd still be Elin Maris. Still be the woman who built a business from nothing. Still be the person who stands her ground when everyone else runs. Still be the strategist who saw the forge's defensive value before anyone else. His hand squeezed hers. Your identity isn't in your hammer, it's in your mind, your will, your refusal to be anything less than yourself. The words settled over her like a warm cloak. You're good at this, Elin said. At what? Saying exactly what I need to hear. I've had practice. 37 mornings of trying to find the right words to convince you. Ronan's smile was wry, though I think actions worked better than words in the end. You fought beside me. Not for me. Beside me. Elin met his eyes. That's what changed my mind. Not the pretty speeches or the persistence, but the fact that when it mattered, you treated me as an equal. Because you are one. Then prove it. Elin's voice strengthened. When the council meets to plan the rebuilding, I want to be there. Not as your mate, but as the master smith and a strategic resource. Done. And I want control over the apprentice program. Full control. Also done. And, Elin, Ronan laughed, the sound warm and real. You don't have to negotiate with me. I'm already convinced. Whatever you want, whatever you need, you have it. She stared at him, looking for the catch, the hidden condition. There wasn't one. He meant it. This is going to be strange, she said finally. What is? Being with someone who doesn't try to control me. Elin shook her head. I don't know how to do this, the partnership thing, the trust thing. Neither do I, really. Ronan's admission was honest. My parents had it, but I never thought I'd find it myself. Most royal matings are political arrangements. Is that what we are? A political arrangement? No. His voice was absolute. We're something messier and better. We're two stubborn people who chose each other despite every logical reason not to. That's a terrible foundation for a relationship. Probably, Ronan grinned. But we're making it work anyway. Despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the uncertainty, Elin laughed. Real laughter, bubbling up from somewhere deep in her chest. Around the forge, people turned to stare. It was probably the first time many of them had heard her laugh. What's funny? Ronan asked. Everything. Nothing. The fact that I spent 37 mornings saying no to you, and now I can't imagine saying anything else but yes. Elin leaned her head on his shoulder, careful of her injuries. We're idiots.
Absolutely.
We almost died. Multiple times. And we're about to rebuild a village while integrating 300 former raiders and training a forge full of inexperienced apprentices. When you say it like that, it sounds impossible. It probably is impossible. Good thing we're both too stubborn to care. Ronan kissed the top of her head. We'll figure it out. Together. Together, Elin echoed. The word was becoming less strange each time she said it. Outside the forge, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The blood had been cleared from the streets. The dead had been buried. Brimhollow was beginning the long process of healing. And inside the forge, surrounded by wounded men who were learning a new trade, Elin Maris sat beside the king she'd finally chosen and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not just hope. Certainty. This was right. They were right. And whatever came next, they'd face it the same way they'd face the wolves. Side by side. Equals. Partners. The forge fire crackled, throwing shadows on the walls. Outside, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. And for the first time since the crisis began, Elin allowed herself to rest. Not because she was defeated, because she was home. 3 months later, Elin's arms still ached when the weather turned cold, but she could swing a hammer again. Not for long, not with the strength she'd once had, but enough. Enough to prove the healer wrong, enough to show the doubters that Elin Maris didn't break so easily. She stood now in the expanded forge, twice the size it had been before the wolf attack, with 4 new anvils and a dozen apprentices working under her direction. The sound of hammering filled the air, a symphony of metal on metal that made her heart sing. Daniel Frost was at the main anvil, working on a commission from Vera's people, a set of reinforced door hinges for one of their new buildings. His technique had improved dramatically over the past months. He'd never be a master smith, but he was competent, reliable, and eager to learn. Beside him, 3 other apprentices worked on various projects: blade repairs, tool maintenance, the endless small jobs that kept a village running. And in the corner, using the techniques Elin had painstakingly taught him one-handed, young Michael Torres was attempting his first solo sword. It was terrible. Elin walked over, her right arm still moving stiffly but functional, and examined his work with a critical eye. "What did I tell you about temperature control?" she asked. Michael flinched. "Keep it cherry red for edge work, white hot for major reshaping. And what is this?" She pointed to the blade, which showed clear signs of overheating. "White hot for edge work," Michael admitted miserably. "I got impatient." "Impatience makes weak steel. Weak steel gets people killed." Elin's voice was stern, but not cruel. "Start over. Do it right this time." "Yes, ma'am." She moved through the forge, correcting technique, answering questions, supervising the controlled chaos of a working smithy. Her arm protested every movement, but she pushed through the pain. The healer had said the more she used it, the stronger it would become. She intended to prove that theory correct. The forge doors opened, letting in a blast of winter air, and Ronan, who'd taken to visiting at least twice a day whether he had official business or not. "You're supposed to be resting that arm," he said by way of greeting. "I rested it for 2 months. That's enough." Elin wiped sweat from her forehead. "Besides, I'm just supervising." "You're hammering. I can see the fresh metal shavings on your apron." "Light hammering. Barely counts." Ronan crossed to her, and despite the audience of a dozen apprentices, he kissed her forehead. The apprentices had stopped gawking at such displays weeks ago. Now they just worked harder whenever the king visited, afraid of being caught slacking. "The council wants to meet tomorrow," Ronan said quietly. "Final review of the winter preparations." "And they want me there." "They specifically requested your presence, yes." Ronan's smile was wry. "Apparently you're considered an essential part of the village's strategic planning now. 3 months ago they wanted me evacuated for my own safety. 3 months ago they were fools. They're learning." Ronan glanced around the expanded forge. "How's production?" "Ahead of schedule. We fulfilled all the village contracts, half of Vera's requests, and we're starting on the spring planting tools." Elin felt pride warm her chest. "The apprentice program is working better than I expected. You're a good teacher." "I'm a demanding teacher. There's a difference." "Both can be true." Ronan watched Daniel work for a moment. "He's improved." "He's adequate." Elin's tone was gruff, but she couldn't hide the satisfaction. Give him another year and he might actually be good.
Movement outside caught her attention. A group of people approaching the forge, led by a figure she recognized immediately. Vera Blackwood, flanked by 3 of her fighters. Elin set down her tools and moved to greet them. Over the past 3 months, Vera's people had integrated into the territory's borderlands better than anyone had predicted. There had been tension, certainly. Old fears didn't die easily, but the northern packs had proven themselves valuable allies. Their fighters trained alongside the territorial defense forces. Their hunters kept the village supplied with fresh meat through the lean winter months. Their craftspeople contributed skills the settled villagers lacked. And their leader visited Elin's forge at least once a week to check on commissions, and Elin suspected to size up the village's defenses. Old habits died hard. "Vera," Elin greeted, "your hinges aren't ready yet." "Not here for hinges." Vera's expression was serious. "We need to talk, privately." Elin exchanged glances with Ronan, then nodded. "My office." She led them to the small room she'd built onto the back of the forge, a space for planning, record-keeping, and private conversations. It was cramped with 5 people inside, but it was soundproof. "What's wrong?" Ronan asked once the door closed. "Maybe nothing. Maybe everything." Vera's jaw was tight. "My scouts found tracks in the northern woods. Human tracks. At least 50 people moving south in organized formation. Refugees, Elin suggested. Armed refugees with military discipline." Vera's eyes were hard. "This isn't another pack looking for shelter. This is something else." "Raiders?" Ronan's voice sharpened. "Possibly, or survivors from one of the northern conflicts." Vera pulled out a rough map, spreading it on Elin's desk. "They're here, about 3 days' travel from your border, moving slowly but deliberately. They'll reach your territory within the week." Elin studied the map, her mind already working through defensive positions. "What do you think they want?" "If I knew that, I wouldn't be worried." Vera's admission was honest. "Could be they're just passing through. Could be they're looking to take what we've built here. Or they could be looking for the same thing your people were," Ronan said quietly. "Safety, shelter, a place to survive the winter." "Possibly." Vera didn't sound convinced. "But we can't afford to assume the best. Not with 50 armed unknowns approaching." "Agreed." Ronan straightened. "We need intelligence. Can your scouts get closer, identify them?" "Already on it, but that takes time, and time is what we don't have." Vera looked between them. "I'm telling you this because we're allies now. Whatever's coming, we face it together. That was the deal." "It was," Ronan confirmed. "And we'll honor it. Your fighters and ours, coordinated defense." "There's another option." Elin's voice cut through the tension. Everyone turned to look at her. "We could meet them," she said, "before they reach the border. Send a delegation, show them we're strong enough to defend ourselves, but open enough to talk." "That's a risk," Vera said flatly. "If they're hostile, we'd be exposing our leadership." "It's also an opportunity." Elin met her eyes. "If they're refugees like you were, scared and desperate, meeting them with weapons drawn will guarantee a fight. Meeting them with open hands might prevent one." "And if they take advantage of that openness?" one of Vera's fighters challenged. "Then we're prepared to respond." Elin's voice was steady. "But we try peace first. That's what separates us from raiders." Ronan was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're proposing yourself as part of this delegation." It wasn't a question. "I am. With a barely healed arm and no combat training. With tactical thinking and a reputation for survival." Elin held his gaze. "I'm the master smith who held the forge against 60 wolves. That means something to people who value strength. It also makes you a target." "Everything makes me a target. I'm your mate." Elin's voice was matter-of-fact. "I can hide behind walls and bodyguards, or I can stand beside you and prove I'm more than just the woman who said yes to a king." Vera laughed, a short, sharp sound. "I like her more every day. She thinks like a northerner." "Is that a compliment?" Elin asked dryly. "From me?" "Yes." Vera turned to Ronan. "She's right. A delegation could work, show strength, offer talk, keep weapons ready, but not drawn." Ronan was silent for a long moment, his internal struggle visible on his face.
Finally, he nodded. We leave tomorrow. Small group. Myself, Elin, Vera, and 6 fighters. 3 from the village, 3 from the northern packs. We meet them on neutral ground and we talk. And if they won't talk, Vera pressed, then we make it very clear that attacking this territory would be the last mistake they ever make. Ronan's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. But we try peace first. The meeting ended with plans being made, scouts being dispatched, and preparations beginning for what might be negotiation or might be war. When Vera and her people left, Ronan turned to Elin with an expression that mixed frustration and admiration. You're determined to put yourself in danger, aren't you? I'm determined to be useful. Elin began organizing the papers on her desk. There's a difference. You're already useful. You run the forge, you train apprentices, you provide strategic counsel, from behind walls, from safety. Elin's voice was quiet but firm. I need to do this, Ronan. I need to prove to myself more than anyone that I'm not broken, that the wolf didn't take away who I am. You've already proven that. To you, maybe. Not to me. She looked at her right arm, flexing the fingers that still didn't move quite right. Every time I can't grip a hammer properly, every time the pain makes me stop mid-strike, I feel like I lost something, like I'm less than I was. I know it's not rational. I know I'm still me, still capable, still valuable. Elin met his eyes. But knowing it and feeling it are different things. Let me do this. Let me stand beside you as an equal, not as someone who needs protecting. Ronan crossed to her, taking her face in his hands with infinite gentleness. You are my equal. You've always been my equal. His voice was rough with emotion. But you're also the person I love, and the thought of you in danger makes me want to lock you in the safest room I can find and never let you out. That's not love, that's possession. I know. He rested his forehead against hers. Which is why I'm saying yes, even though every instinct I have is screaming at me to keep you safe. Elin felt warmth flood through her chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm assigning you the 2 best fighters we have as personal bodyguards. Ronan, that's the compromise. You come on the delegation, you get bodyguards, non-negotiable. Elin sighed but nodded. Fine, but they stay back unless there's actual danger. Deal. They stood there for a moment, foreheads touching, breathing in sync. We're really doing this, aren't we? Elin said quietly, building something new, together. We really are. Ronan's smile was soft. How does it feel? Terrifying, wonderful. Right. Elin pulled back just enough to see his face clearly. Mostly right. I'll take it. The next morning, the delegation assembled at the village gates. Elin wore practical traveling clothes and carried the blade she'd forged during the wolf crisis. No longer just a desperate weapon, but a symbol of her survival. Her right arm ached in the cold, but she'd wrapped it in wool and leather to keep it warm and mobile. Ronan sat astride his horse, looking every inch the king despite the simple traveling gear. Vera and her fighters mounted their own horses with the easy grace of people born in the saddle. And standing beside Elin's horse, looking nervous but determined, was Sarah Morrison. You're not coming, Elin said immediately. Yes, I am. Sarah's jaw was set in a way Elin recognized, the same stubborn determination she saw in her own mirror every morning. You need someone who knows horses, in case there's trouble. And I'm the best rider in Brim Hollow. You're also my only real friend, and I won't risk you. You don't get to decide that. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. You taught me that, remember? When you refused to evacuate during the wolf attack. My choice. My risk. Elin stared at her friend, seeing herself reflected back. The same fierce independence, the same refusal to be protected. Fine, she said finally, but stay close. Always do. They rode out as the sun cleared the horizon, 9 people on a mission that could determine the fate of the entire territory. The journey north took 2 days of hard riding. They camped rough, taking turns on watch, every sound in the darkness potentially hostile. But nothing attacked. The woods were eerily quiet, as if even the wildlife was holding its breath. On the morning of the 3rd day, Vera's scouts returned with news. Found them, the lead scout reported. 43 people total, Mixed ages, both genders. They're camped in a clearing about 2 miles ahead, and they've posted sentries. Armed? Ronan asked. Lightly. Mostly hunting weapons, a few swords, nothing that suggests a military force. The scout hesitated. But they look organized, disciplined. These aren't refugees running scared, they're moving with purpose. Then we'll meet them with purpose too. Ronan turned to the group. Vera, take your fighters and circle to the east. Stay hidden, but be ready to move if things turn hostile. Sarah, Marcus, Jacob, you three stay with the horses, ready to ride for help if needed. That leaves just you and Elin walking into an unknown camp, Vera protested. That leaves a king and his mate approaching as emissaries, not conquerors. Ronan's voice was firm. We show respect, we show strength, and we don't draw weapons unless they do first. And if they do? Marcus asked. Then you run for Brim Hollow, and Vera's people extract us. Ronan's smile was grim, but I'm betting they won't. 20 minutes later, Elin walked beside Ronan into the stranger's camp, her heart pounding but her stride steady. The camp was well organized, tents arranged in defensive positions, fires carefully controlled, supplies stored efficiently. And the people themselves looked hardened, capable, survivors of something terrible. A woman stepped forward to meet them, older than Vera, with scars that spoke of countless battles and eyes that had seen too much death. Alpha King Ronan Vale, she said, her voice carrying the accent of the far northern territories. We'd heard you were in the area. And you are? Captain Mira Thorne, what's left of the Ironwood Guard. Her smile was bitter. Or what used to be the Guard, before Ironwood fell. Elin felt ice slide down her spine. Ironwood had been one of the largest settlements in the far north, a fortified city with walls 30 feet high and a population of over 2,000. What happened? Ronan's voice was carefully neutral. Winter came early, game disappeared, crops failed. Mira's jaw tightened. Then the Frost clans came down from the mountains, driven by the same starvation. We held the walls for 3 weeks. Then supplies ran out, and people started eating each other. Silence fell like snow. We evacuated who we could, Mira continued. These 43 are what survived the retreat south. We've been walking for 2 months, living on what we could hunt and scavenge. And now you're here, Ronan said quietly. Looking for what? Honestly, we don't know. Mira's admission was raw. We heard rumors of settlements to the south that we're holding. Thought maybe we could trade our skills for shelter. We're fighters, most of us. Good ones. But we're also just tired. Elin studied the woman's face, seeing the exhaustion there, the desperation hidden under layers of military discipline. You want shelter, she said, not conquest. Mira's eyes shifted to her. You're the blacksmith, the one who held a forge against a wolf pack. I am. Then you understand survival, understand doing whatever it takes. Mira's voice was steady. We're not raiders. We're not looking to take what isn't ours. But we need help, and we're willing to work for it. Ronan and Elin exchanged glances. A silent conversation passed between them, born of 3 months of partnership and trust. We have space, Ronan said finally. Not much, but enough. The northern packs who helped us during the wolf crisis are settling the borderlands. There's room for more if you're willing to integrate, to follow our laws, to contribute to the community. What kind of contribution? Mira asked warily. Defense training? Your people are experienced soldiers. We need that expertise. In exchange, you get land, supplies, and protection. Ronan's voice was firm. But there are rules. No raiding, no violence against other settlers. Disputes go to the council for resolution. And if we break those rules, then you leave. Permanently. Ronan's eyes were hard. We're building something here. A place where people can survive without tearing each other apart. You want to be part of that? You follow the rules. No exceptions. Mira was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, she extended her hand. We follow the rules. You have my word. Ronan shook her hand. Then welcome to the Southern Territories. Relief rippled through the gathered refugees. Several of them actually started crying, quiet, exhausted tears of people who'd finally found safety after months of running. There's one more thing, Elin said. Everyone turned to look at her. This territory survived a wolf pack, integrated a group of northern refugees, and is about to absorb 43 more people. We did it by working together, by combining skills and resources. Elin's voice strengthened. But we can't keep doing this piecemeal. We need a real plan, a coordinated effort to prepare for what's coming. What's coming? Mira asked. Worse winters, more refugees, more conflict over shrinking resources. Elin looked around at the assembled people. Refugees from Ironwood, fighters from the northern packs who'd emerged from hiding, villagers from Brim Hollow who'd followed to provide support. The old ways aren't working. The isolated villages, the territorial conflicts, the refusal to cooperate. It's all breaking down. We need something new. What are you proposing? Ronan asked, though from his expression she suspected he already knew. An alliance, not just Brim Hollow, but all the settlements in this region. Shared resources, coordinated defense, integrated communities. Elin's voice rang with conviction. We stop fighting over scraps and start building something that can actually withstand what's coming. That's ambitious, Mira said slowly. Also probably impossible. So was surviving 60 wolves with 30 men. Elin met her eyes. We did it anyway. She's right. Vera's voice came from the tree line as she and her fighters emerged from concealment. The northern territories are collapsing. This is just the first wave. By spring, there will be hundreds more refugees heading south, maybe thousands. And if we're not ready, we'll be overwhelmed, Ronan finished. He looked at Elin with something like wonder. You've been thinking about this. I've been watching the numbers. Elin gestured to the refugees. Every group that comes south is escaping something worse up north. Eventually, we'll either integrate them or fight them. I'd rather integrate. The council will fight this, Marcus warned. They're already nervous about the northern packs, adding more outsiders. Then we convince them. Ronan's voice was firm. We show them the numbers, the logistics, the reality of what's coming. And we give them a choice. Adapt and survive. Or cling to the old ways and die. He turned to address everyone present. Refugees, villagers, northern fighters. This is bigger than Brim Hollow now. Bigger than any single settlement. His voice carried with natural authority. We're at a turning point. What we build here in the next few months will determine whether our children inherit a future or just more of the same desperate struggle. I choose the future. Easy to say when you're a king, someone from Mira's group called out. Harder when you're just trying to keep your family alive. I know, Ronan's voice was honest. But I'm offering you a chance to do both. Keep your family alive and build something better. It won't be easy. It'll require compromise, trust, and work. But the alternative is watching everything fall apart while we cling to old grudges and territorial boundaries. Silence fell. Elin could see people wrestling with the decision, weighing hope against fear. Then Mira stepped forward again. The Ironwood Guard is in, she said firmly. We've seen what happens when communities fail to work together. We won't make that mistake again. One by one, others voiced agreement. Not everyone. Some still looked skeptical, afraid. But enough. Enough to start. The return journey to Brim Hollow took on a different character. Instead of a small delegation, they traveled with 43 new settlers who would need housing, food, integration. It should have felt overwhelming. Instead, Elin felt energized. This was what she'd wanted without realizing it. Not just survival, but purpose. Not just defending what existed, but building something new. You were magnificent, Ronan said quietly as they rode. The way you spoke to them, the vision you laid out, that was leadership. That was common sense. Elin adjusted her grip on the reins, her right arm protesting but functional. Anyone could see the pattern. No, you saw it first, and you had the courage to say it out loud. Ronan's eyes held hers. That's leadership, Elin, whether you claim the title or not. I'm a blacksmith. You're also a strategist, a teacher, and apparently a political visionary. Ronan's smile was warm. You can be more than one thing. So can you. Elin glanced at him. You're not just a king anymore. You're building something different. An alliance, not an empire. We're building it together. Ronan's hand found hers, squeezing gently. That's the only way it works. They rode into Brim Hollow 3 days later, the expanded group drawing stares and whispers. By the time they reached the village center, the council had already assembled, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Thomas Ray stepped forward, his face carved from stone. "You brought 43 armed strangers into our territory without council approval," he said flatly. "I brought 43 refugees who need shelter and are willing to work for it," Ronan corrected. "And I'm informing the council, not asking permission. Territorial defense is the king's purview." "This isn't defense. This is survival." Elin's voice cut through the brewing argument. "And if you'll stop posturing for 5 minutes, we'll explain why." Thomas's eyes narrowed, but he gestured for her to continue. What followed was an hour of intense discussion. Elin laying out the pattern of northern collapse, Ronan presenting the strategic benefits of integration, Vera and Mira both providing first-hand accounts of the deteriorating situation. The council listened, argued, raised objections, and slowly, grudgingly, began to understand. "This is a fundamental change in how we operate," Helen York said finally. "You're talking about opening our borders, sharing resources, essentially dissolving the old territorial boundaries." "I'm talking about adaptation," Ronan replied. "The old boundaries were designed for a different world. They don't work anymore." "And if we refuse," Thomas challenged, "then Brim Hollow stays isolated, vulnerable, and when the next wave of refugees arrives, and they will arrive, we'll be facing them alone." Ronan's voice was steady. "Or we can lead, build the alliance now on our terms, with our values guiding the process." "You're asking us to trust people we don't know," another council member said. "I'm asking you to trust the process we've already proven works." Elin gestured to Vera. 3 months ago, you thought the northern packs would raid us. Instead, they've become our strongest allies. The same can happen with the Ironwood refugees, with whoever comes next. Or it could all fall apart, Thomas said quietly. "It could," Elin admitted, "but staying the same is guaranteed to fail. At least this way we have a chance." The council voted that night. It was close. 6 in favor, 5 against. But it was enough. The alliance was approved. Over the next 3 months, Brim Hollow transformed. New buildings rose to house the influx of settlers. The forge expanded again, now employing 20 apprentices from 3 different communities. Training grounds were established where the Ironwood Guard taught combat techniques to local defenders. And at the center of it all, Elin worked. Her arm grew stronger. Not back to full strength, it never would be, but strong enough. She adapted her techniques, learned to compensate, found new ways to create, and she taught, constantly, tirelessly. By spring, the forge had become more than a workplace. It was a symbol, proof that different communities could work together, that old wounds could heal, that something new and better was possible. On the first warm day of the new season, Ronan found Elin at the main anvil, supervising Daniel as he completed his first truly masterful sword. "It's done," Daniel said, his voice awed as he examined the blade. Elin inspected it critically. The balance was perfect. The edge, razor sharp. The temper, exactly right. "It's acceptable," she said, fighting a smile. "Acceptable?" Daniel looked crushed. "Fine. It's good." Elin's smile broke through. "Very good, actually. You've earned your journeyman status." Daniel's face transformed with joy. Around the forge, other apprentices stopped work to congratulate him, a moment of genuine celebration. Ronan waited until the commotion died down, then drew Elin outside into the spring sunshine. "The Alliance Council wants to meet next week," he said. "Representatives from 8 settlements now. They want to formalize the structure, establish trade routes, coordinate defenses." "That's good." "They also want you there. As an official representative." Elin raised an eyebrow. "I'm a blacksmith." "You're the person who conceived the alliance, the strategist who saw the pattern before anyone else." Ronan's voice was firm. "You belong at that table." "The council will object. Thomas especially." "Thomas can object all he wants." "You're going!" Ronan pulled her close, careful of her still healing arm. "The question is, will you accept the role?" Elin thought about it. Thought about the forge, the apprentices, the work she loved. Then she thought about the bigger picture, the alliance growing, settlements cooperating, a future being built. "Yes," she said finally, "but the forge comes first. Always." "Always," Ronan agreed. Ronan. They stood there in the spring sunshine, listening to the sounds of the forge behind them, hammers ringing, apprentices laughing, the eternal song of metal being shaped. "We did it," Elin said quietly. "Built something that lasted." "We're still building." Ronan's arms tightened around her. "This is just the beginning." "Good." Elin leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence, the certainty of partnership. "I'm not done yet." "Neither am I." Inside the forge, someone called for the master smith. Elin pulled away from Ronan with a smile. "Duty calls." "Always does." Ronan kissed her, quick and warm. "I'll see you tonight." "Tonight," she agreed. She walked back into the forge, into the heat and noise and purposeful chaos. Her arm ached slightly, a reminder of how close she'd come to losing everything. But she was here, still creating, still teaching, still building, not despite the wolf attack, but because of it. Because she'd learned that strength wasn't about never breaking. It was about breaking and choosing to rebuild anyway. The forge fire crackled, throwing shadows on the walls. Outside, spring was transforming the harsh frontier into something gentler, more forgiving. And inside, Elin Maris, master smith, strategist, survivor, picked up her hammer and went back to work, creating order from chaos, building the future, one strike at a time. Together with a king who'd learned that the strongest bond couldn't be commanded or taken, only earned day by day, strike by strike, yes by yes.